With the wounds of December 89's earthquake in the healing process, inner city retailers are now realising their total losses. A report commissioned by the City Centre Group shows 52% of retailers were underinsured, with an average loss of $63,000 on top of the $40,000 drop in trade. Peter Evans from City Centre says Newcastle has been dumped in its hour of need by the politicians in Macquarie Street and Canberra.
I think government has scant regard for the problems of this city.
Each business has received an average of just $16,000 in government aid, while 40% of retailers recorded a drop in sales. A surprising 18% registered an increase despite the quake. Peter Ryan, NBN News. The volunteer rescue workers were each personally congratulated by the Governor. The original Cessnock Rescue Squad was set up in 1976 and shot to national prominence with their life-saving work at the Newcastle earthquake. Rear Admiral Peter Sinclair was full of praise.
It therefore takes very special people to volunteer to undertake such work. I am with such people today, and as the Governor who represents all of the people of New South Wales, I want to assure you of the community's gratitude and its admiration.
The Governor officially opened the new Curry depot and commissioned a heavy-duty rescue truck for service. The Cessnock District Rescue Squad receives around 100 calls a year, working with police, ambulance and fire brigade. The new depot gives Curry residents an extra link with emergency services.
The event marked an unofficial start of summer for Terrigal. 2 days of sailing attracted world-class competitors to what is also a major meet on the New South Wales Sailboard Series calendar. The breeze was slow to make its presence felt, even the seagulls settled in for a wait. Volleyball helped pass time on the beach. Olympic representative Greg Hyde and world windsurfer champ Tom Ludick headed out to the point in search of wind and found a few pockets to show off their skills. The first gusts of a healthy afternoon sea breeze were welcomed on shore. And it wasn't long before more than 100 colourful competitors were in their element. An 8 to 10 kilometre course was sailed in 4 classes. Far from the cooling sea breeze, 250 horses and riders were doing it tough in cross-country trials at Lochinvar. Star in the saddle Vicky Roycroft put dash of courage through his paces. Billed as a one-day event, a record number of entries pushed competition right across the weekend. A final tally of scores from dressage and cross-country riding saw 2 locals, Leanne Ellis on Grandview Gulliver and Heath Ryan on Comiac, take the advanced and novice honours respectively.
BHP believes the key to competing internationally is a skilled and flexible workforce.
We're in the process of going through a whole program for redesigning work, and coming out of that program of redesign work is the identification of a number of skill deficiencies, and we aim to address those.
Traditional apprenticeships such as boiler making and metal fabrication will be broadened to take in skills from other trades, and adult training will be offered to current employees in a bid to improve their flexibility in the workplace. Education will begin at the shop floor, with a new regional training centre on the Tubemaker site offering basic communication and literacy skills. In the next few years, job restructuring will require all employees to have a basic knowledge of computers. At the management level, courses such as personal development and advanced supervision will be offered. Realising that training is a marketable product, the company will also offer accredited courses in technical training and management to other businesses and heavy industries.
We believe we have some unique skills in the industrial sphere which can be used for the benefit of the hunter. So we aim to market our courses on a commercial basis to operations outside BHP.
Operation Eagle Sweep was a mobile blitz which targeted known trouble spots for hooliganism and driving offences. Around 40 officers saturated an area from Woy Woy to Wyong and laid 79 charges.
We purposely advertised that we would be putting a concerted effort into reducing the amount of hoodlums on the coast and the activity of vandals.
26 motorists were charged with drink driving. They were among 287 drivers pulled over in random breath tests. Among the more serious arrests, a 38-year-old man who returned a breath analysis of .230, only to be arrested less than 3 hours later with a reading of .195. Police say the publicity surrounding the crackdown meant there were actually fewer troublemakers on the streets. Even so, they say they've unearthed useful information on known offenders. That intelligence will be used in future covert operations. Leslie Robinson, NBN News.
Members of the ethnic community gathered at City Hall to mark the service's 10-year milestone. Over the decade, more than 7,000 people from non-English speaking backgrounds have been directed to the appropriate medical facilities and assisted by interpreters and ethnic healthcare workers attached to the unit.
We have expanded from initially a healthcare interpreter service to a migrant health unit with 3 services altogether.
Students from Newcastle University's communication course compiled an exhibition of photographs depicting the work of the service in the Hunter. A new video was launched for the Chinese and Vietnamese mothers having their babies in Australia, offering advice in their own language. Also today, the launch of the now familiar low-fat diet campaign, this time updated to reach the ethnic community with cooking hints printed in 9 languages.
Today, the member for Swansea stayed away from State Parliament to sort out his affairs at home, working out the best way to levy next year's controversial rates for Lake Macquarie. But there were financial affairs even closer to home for Ivan Welsh. Revelations before Newcastle District Court Registrar that he owes more than $300,000 to 15 creditors, including $140,000 to one, $29,000 to the ANZ Bank and $20,000 to the Commonwealth Bank. This long list of debts came to light when he requested time to pay back more than $60,000, which he had pledged as guarantor of a Porky's restaurant business in Newcastle, which collapsed. He says uninsured equipment worth $50,000 was destroyed by last December's earthquake.
We had problems with finances previous to this latest bit, but we were managing to continue payments on our responsibilities, and at this point we were hit with a $62,500 debt.
In today's Economic Times, he believes that debt is not so bad.
In Newcastle, I believe there are a lot of individuals and companies that are probably faring a lot worse than I am.
But his parliamentary campaign manager, Dr Ian Seggy, believes he ought to resign from both public offices, saying his personal finances reveal that he is not a good manager. And MP for Charlestown, Richard Face, said he would resign if he was in the same financial position. Have you considered resigning?
No, not yet.
What would it take to make you resign?
I would think that the only thing that would make me resign is if this pressure continues and it has a detrimental effect on my family. Resigning is to shirk the responsibilities. I mean, if I resign, it puts me in a worse position, if you can understand. I'm in a position of no income, therefore we're not paying any of the debts, and therefore obviously we go bankrupt.
His resignation would also be at a cost to Lake Macquarie.
There'd certainly be costs involved because there'd have to be a by-election and that would cost the ratepayers money. And I know that there'd be quite a few people there that would probably say it's worth it, but those who've supported me and those who have seen what we've been able to do in this council certainly wouldn't want that cost, and they've got their opportunity next September anyhow.
At 61, Keith Campbell is about to call it a day. He's committed his working life to the State Ambulance Service and has seen many changes. This was how the fleet looked in the late 40s. Since then, air ambulance and modern vehicles fully equipped with the latest technology have become the norm.
The advances that have occurred in the 43 years that I have been in the service has been overwhelming, and all these advances have made for the better management of patients.
Keith Campbell has been this region's superintendent for the past 15 years. He says artificial resuscitation techniques have changed dramatically. Campbell was instrumental in computerising much of the ambulance service and updating the contribution scheme. In retirement, he hopes to pursue his sport and travel interests.
I have come in contact with some really, truly wonderful people. Certainly we've seen some extremely sad moments as well, and horrifying situations. But by and large, I have tried to make the most of a job and achieved happiness and fulfilment from the job.
Keith retires on January the 4th. His replacement has not yet been named. John Church, NBN News.
Today was a chance to reply to the 29 submissions received by the inquiry, 17 of which came from non-government bodies. Port Stephens Council said nothing had so far been raised to deter it from supporting the expansion, which would see a 75% increase in production, creating 300 new jobs. The State Pollution Control Commission said, although it was happy with Tomago's existing system for treating runoff water, it suggested a new outfall pipe from the pond to be directed further into the Hunter River. The Department of Planning also reaffirmed its backing, but said the public should have access to Tomago's self-monitoring of pollution levels. But the Oyster Growers Association and residents remain concerned. Metallurgist and geologist Dean Crawford said the US has the technology to reduce fluoride emissions by 6 times the level experienced from Tomago. But he remained unconvinced by Tomago's promise that the plant will continue its model environmental standards.
No company will spend extra money if they don't have to. It just adds to their production costs. So the only way that the new technology will be adopted will be if the regulations, if the Clean Air Act is revised, if the licence conditions are revised.
He and other residents feel their concerns will have little clout on the final decision.
It's a little bit depressing, I must say, when you know that a lot of issues like this are a fait accompli. We already know that Mr Greiner and Mr Carr want this to go ahead. The State Pollution wants it to go ahead. The Water Board wants it to go ahead, and particularly Elcom, who's selling them all the power. There's no real problem with that, provided that it's done in a clean fashion.
The Commissioner's findings and recommendations will not be made known until the end of next month, hopefully before Christmas. Rebecca Skinner, NBN News.
The arrest of an unemployed 32-year-old man early yesterday morning was an unexpected development in an inquiry that had begun with immense public interest. The discovery of 47-year-old June Brislane's body at the rear of an abandoned cottage in Newcastle's east had stunned the city, which was even more horrified by the extent of her injuries. Police said she'd died as a result of massive head wounds inflicted by a star picket, which had then been used to impale the victim. Police conducted a blanket inquiry in the surrounding neighbourhood, interviewing hundreds of residents who may have seen the woman before her death. The discovery of her handbag on nearby Newcastle Beach added more information to the inquiry. But after weeks of investigation, homicide detectives could only reveal that Mrs Brislane was reported leaving the Tattersalls nightclub and was later seen at a bus shelter on Friday morning shortly before her death. Then, late yesterday, after several hours of growing media speculation, detectives announced they'd laid charges.
All I can say is a 32-year-old man's been charged with the murder of June Brislane, and he'll be appearing in court tomorrow morning.
Arthur Kerry Ronald Scott of Belmont North appeared in Newcastle local court this morning, charged with murdering June Brislane. Police revealed they'd interviewed him twice before when he'd allegedly deceived police as to the nature of his relationship with the victim. Police said Scott had taken them to a site at the derelict building where he'd allegedly told them he drank wine with the victim. The site was the same as where Mrs. Brislane's body was discovered. Magistrate Jeff Brown formally refused bail and recommended that Scott undergo psychiatric assessment on the advice of Police Prosecutor Sergeant Phil Lloyd, who observed that the victim had undergone what he described as perverse violence both at the time of and immediately after her death. Scott was remanded in custody to appear at Newcastle local court for mention only on December 12. Tom Hilston, NBN News.
A bulldozer prepared a ramp onto the highway for the dismantled giant, which is on its way from Hebden to Wombo Colliery. Although only 39 kilometres, it will take a week for it to crawl there. Assembled, the dragline would look similar to this one. It removes overburden and coal from open-cut mines. So far, the load has crossed a creek, the Northern Railway line, and passed under high-voltage power lines. Timber sleepers form a protective mat over the highway. The YE-based company making the lift has had experience overseas hauling 10-storey buildings, but this is unique.
I believe this rate is probably the largest mobile lift and mobile move in Australia. I've not heard throughout the industry of any moves of this magnitude across country.
The dragline has a replacement value of $27 million, but the cost of moving it is nobody's business.
No, that's confidential.
The rig's 240-metre boom will follow on an 86-wheel trailer. The load won't reach its destination until next Wednesday. Meanwhile, on the Pacific Highway near Hexham, motorists got a first-hand feel for big city peak hour conditions. Traffic was slowed to a crawl as a prime mover laboured to haul a 40-tonne section of ship deck. A width of 7.5 metres made manoeuvring on the four-lane highway an exercise in precision, and traffic was stopped completely during a precarious U-turn onto the Hexham Bridge. That achieved, it was all plain sailing to the Carrington Slipways complex.
For the second time, Region 5 Australia are hosting an international ski event, which has again attracted the very best in our nation and some of Uncle Sam's finest. And with upwards of $1 million worth of glittering machinery lining the banks of the lake at Toukley, it was easy to see that this series was no ordinary rip round the pond. The Open Women's event was minus Aussie Leanne Hickey, but Laurie Dunmore wasn't concerned as it was still a pretty hot field.
Well, they said it's a bit bumpy in that far turn, so we just got to play it smart. So I have a pretty good pull today for it, so that's okay.
Countrywoman Cheryl Ruston was looking forward to the challenge.
I skied this morning and got second place, and I had a really good run. I felt real good on my skis, so we'll see what happens.
9 boats and skiers greeted the starter, and it was a perfect beginning. Immediately, Mirage and Suddenly opened up a gap on the others, and it was to be an enthralling encounter. Tracy Graziano from Australia was up behind Mirage, and Dunsmore behind Suddenly. Each competitor had to cover 8 laps of the course, and it was breathtaking pace as they rounded the second buoy at the southern end locked together. Status towing Janelle Hunt was up with the leaders early, but the sheer pressure and pace of Graziano and Dunsmore soon put paid to her chances. Mirage held the barest of leads for most of the journey, but with a lap to go, Dunsmore closed the gap with the rest of the field a half a lap behind. Nothing separated them as they rounded the top buoy for the run home, and it was anyone's guess as to who would be victorious. But gritting her teeth, Graziano was able to extract a little bit more energy, and she crossed the line 14/100ths of a second in front of a gallant Dunsmore. The men's event followed a similar path with Mirage and Suddenly duelling for most of the 10-lap race. Jamie Oliver from the land of Oz was up behind Mirage and made a flying start. His main rival was to be Corey Cook from America, and these two had a ding-dong battle for 5.5 laps. Cook would lead into the southern buoy and then Oliver would fight back. But on lap 6, disaster for Cook as down he came and his race was run.
Ski skipped a bit and I tried to react to turn, and all of a sudden
I was in, the ski just steered in, and we got back, came up after my fall and noticed the buckle was gone, so we all figured out the buckle must have came undone and just act like a parachute and pull me in through the corner.
Oliver skied brilliantly for the remainder of the race, with Top Gun, Status and the Sting having a great fight for the minor placings. But it was Australia Day at Toukley as Oliver crossed the line a worthy winner. The final races are on Sunday at 11:30. The women's event was the old battle between the United States and Australia, with Laurie Dunsmore behind number 157 Suddenly, needing a win to edge out Tracy Graziano of Australia, skiing behind Mirage for the overall title. Marnie Bricker and Arlen Cooler got the best of the first 2 laps, and then Dunsmore, growing in confidence on the tricky course, took over and the race changed complexion immediately. By lap 4, Dunsmore and Suddenly had opened up a huge gap, and the contest for second was on in earnest between Bricker and Graziano. For the next 3 laps, that was a fiercely fought battle raged at top speed, and in the end it was Graziano and Mirage who won the fight for second. But Dunsmore and Suddenly had cleared out to record an emphatic win, at the same time picking up the Open Women's overall crown. Modestly, Laurie Dunsmore passed all the credit to her husband.
My husband's a great mechanic, keeps it running for us. He's the best.
The men's event was full of drama. 11 boats and skiers made a flying start and the pace was right on. At the second buoy, Little separated 5 boats, with Status and David McMillan with their nose just in front. Sensation on lap 2 as Friday's winner Jamie Oliver behind Mirage came a cropper and was in some pain with a nasty shoulder injury. McMillan continued to lead for 4 laps, but you could have thrown a blanket over Status and Top Gun with Jason Campbell as its skier. On lap 5, Campbell and Top Gun edged into the lead, and from there on slowly but surely built a commanding break. Campbell needed a win for a series triumph, and he was right on target. Further trouble on lap 8 when American Corey Cook took a heavy tumble, and he was gently lifted into the rescue boat suffering a neck injury. On his return to shore, Cook was reported to be severely shaken and was to be taken to hospital for observation. Back on the water, and the men's final had developed into a 1-horse race. Campbell crossed the line well ahead of McMillan, and the win gave him 800 points, 50 more than his nearest rival McMillan, and Campbell had secured the overall trophy. Since reforming in 1988 with 7 members, the Hunter Rowing Club has gone from strength to strength and now boasts a membership of 75. After the first 2 regattas this year, Hunter held a commanding lead of 70 points over their nearest rivals, Manning. Today, 127 competitors from 6 clubs and 5 regional high schools rode in conditions that varied from choppy to flat as a tack. The Open Men's Fours was dominated by the Manning Club, who filled all the top placings, with Hunter next. In the final analysis, Hunter scored 83 points today and 226 overall to take the Central District's championship, with Manning next on 123. The regatta was held in conjunction with the Lake Macquarie Games, and organisers are confident that rowing will become a major sport on the lake in a couple of years. At District Park Tennis Courts, the finals of the AMP Newcastle Classic were played, and in the ladies' singles final, it was an all-Sydney affair between Christine Radford and Michelle Jaggard. Both girls have had plenty of overseas experience, and it was evident today. Radford got away to a great start, taking the first set comfortably 6-3. Although her serve let her down at times, she was able to capitalise on unforced errors from Michelle Jaggard and wrapped up the match in straight sets 6-3, 6-2. In the men's final, it was also an all-Sydney affair between Jason Karsk and the left-handed John Ireland. Karsk broke Ireland's serve in the first game of the match and then held his own serve for the remainder of the set, breaking Ireland once more for a scoreline of 6-2. The second set followed a similar pattern, with Ireland dropping his serve right from the outset, and from there Karsk never looked like losing, wrapping up the match in straight sets 6-2, 6-3 and pocketing $2,000 for his weekend's work.